Yo, yo, yo.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I hear you.
You hear me? You hear me? Okay,
Hey, okay.
man. You're coming in loud and clear. You look good. Everything
It's
looks
that
great.
Zoom. And I'll tell you what, Google is my friend. I'm gonna start paying them for these complimentary improvements on my looks.
That's awesome. That looks great. Sounds great. Everything's good. We'll just wait for a couple other people to get in here. I was running behind getting down to the office today, so I wanted to go over a little bit about. Did you send Jory anything over?
Yeah, I sent it to you too.
Okay, we'll go over that. But
I wanted you to read the article because I thought it was a little funny, but I had an analogy about when West Frazier said they're having a curtailment. It was like a hot summer day in the Carolinas, and everybody, the lifeguard blew the whistle, said, "Pool breaks over," and everybody ran and jumped in the pool. About 5 minutes later, somebody says, "Turd in the pool," and everybody has to bail out of the pool. So
that's the old Babe Ruth trick.
Yeah. Yeah. This week was the turd in the pool week.
Well, yeah, I looked at that announcement a couple of weeks ago, and everybody pushed it out and were excited about it. And it came at a time when futures was such a discount to cash and was probably in the process of rallying anyway. It got some things moving a little bit, but again, as you always said, and I always have to remind myself, whenever people are putting curtailments out, it's not because things are really good.
No, they can't sell it, especially when the funny thing about it is I've got, I don't know, 500 followers, subscribers, whatever, and for 40 years I've said the same thing, that curtailments are bearish. It's an indication that the mill believes they cannot sell future production, and you don't pile on for curtailments, but the market always reacts the same. Everybody jumps on it. It says like, "Uh-oh, shortage." And they start buying it, and they can realize, well, wait a minute, let me look at the fine print. Well, this is a fourth quarter curtailment. It's going to be one shift at 2 mills. It's not like it's like there's going to be no lumber forever. And it was 2 months from even taking place. And everybody goes, oops.
Look at when things are really blowing and going, and people tell you, we don't think we can find a way to add more shifts. They always do, right? And this is the exact opposite. This is more, we're going to keep running. We're just taking some shifts off.
Yeah, and to say that taking a shift off is a permanent curtailment is ludicrous. I mean, who believes that it's just like we've turned the knob back and we promise we're never going to turn it up again. Right.
It's all in the delivery and the way it gets marketed, right?
Yeah, talking your position.
Well, so let's talk about. So everybody, welcome to Lunch with Lumbermen with Matt Layman, Layman's Lumber Guide, Ashley Boeckholt Materials Exchange, and you set something over that I wanted to talk about too, because I have Matt Beamer on the phone and Greg on the phone, and we always miss talking about the biggest species, the species that still has the most.
Everything.
It's if somebody ever wants to get into trading something and wants an opportunity to be like the old school markets where it's call around and you talk to your buddy at the mill and the other person, and there's a lot of indecision and non-communication from the producer to the initial consumer. There's a lot of tossed salad in between there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where the real details, and that's where the money's made. So when you send something over on text me the other day, said I want to talk about. I hear the Blue Angels going by right now. We got the air show downtown. When you talk about, let's talk about how Southern Yellow Pine is traded. It kind of piques my interest because spruce, there's 3 or 4 big mills, and everybody can look at the CME, and nobody has any better access for the most part to any of those big mills than anybody else. Where the real opportunity lies is in the southern U.S. all from the mill to the secondaries to the distributors to people that are long and short in the middle to the end consumer that can be a retail yard, a multifamily builder that just decided they're going to start putting wood in the ground and thinks because they're buying direct, they're buying better, when in fact they may be able to get something $100 cheaper from a secondary that bought 500 trucks. So
or you can get it $100 cheaper because you look one state over to the left.
Yeah, so you and I talked the other day. Last call, I'm like, Matt, look at the East. It's $100 different than, or look at the West is $100 different than the East. And you're like, yeah. And some people just won't make that call, right?
Yeah, they're not aware of it. But I tell you, who does know that is your lumber broker. You know, your broker who's on the phone. He spends the first part of every day calling around, finding out what everybody's got. And you look at somebody told, I'm going to throw Random Length's name out because they're the be all end all for prices right now, but quote right now. But the Greg Kuda was mentioning in the show the other day, like he said, I'm sure Matt's going to talk about this, the spread between Southern Yellow Pine and futures. And they're really the Southern Yellow Pine east side was like $800, west side's like $700, futures like $600. Okay, just kind of rounding everything together. And so Southern Pine looked like it was a $200 premium to the board, but it really wasn't. It was 10s and 14s were $200 higher than their relationship to everything else, just two lengths. And it skewed the Random Length price because the random, and I'm going to be Random Lengths publication, Random Lengths tally. Southern Yellow Pine is not traded by Random Length prices. They're traded by specified prices. And 80% of that wood goes by truck. Probably 95% of it goes by specified price, not by Random Length price. Yeah. Because people like, mobile home manufacturers like to have 2x4 14s. Truss manufacturers like to have 14s and 10s. Everybody wants the retail yards like to have, say, 8s and 16s, and the redheaded stepchild in Southern Yellow Pine is 2x4 12. So if you can work that into your schedule or your routine of what you use, if you have found a usage for 2x4 12s and make that your primary item that you need, you'll always be able to be under the market with buying Southern Yellow Pine. But I think the biggest thing is the cross market opportunities. I break my prices down into east and west. I go Alabama, Georgia, Florida, North, South Carolina, Virginia. And if you think about the geographic area of that, to think that you could put one number on anything and say that it's worth X, because if you're trying to ship a load of lumber from South Georgia to Virginia and you're competing against a load from northern North Carolina to Virginia, you got a $50,000 difference in freight rate. So you really, it's not a one easy way to skin a cat. You really got to be in it, be a geographically know where you are, where your mills are, what your relationship for freights are. But the thing about the spread on the east side versus west side was really just a skewed number in those 10s and 14s being $200 out of whack. And I'm not sure that number was even obtained. I don't know where somebody told somebody who printed it down and said, that's the number. But if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, trying to look for a load of 2x4 10s and 14s, all you had to do is call Alabama and you could buy them for $125, $1,000 cheaper delivered. So I'm not sure that number was even real. So
that number on your briefing from the 18th, where it shows 2x4 Southwest at 580 and 2x4 Southeast at 650. You said that was thrown off by a couple of the lengths.
What day is that? That's old, isn't it?
That must be old. That's August. Well, it says August 18th.
I guess that's pretty about 1 minute old. But
so
that number also reflects about $100 decline in the east side number. If you look at the change in the price, it was like $50-$75, something like that. But
yeah, what was pine down this week? That was a big change, eh?
It's down $100. It's $100 a day from the first of the week.
Okay.
So my numbers reflected somewhere between 50 and 75 bucks because it was just catching on. And I mean, it happened late yesterday afternoon or through the day yesterday, but numbers went from being kind of at random -10 to -50, then -100. It just like.
So if I'm a broker right now, I'm out covering short orders, and I'm probably not telling people that the market is falling off yet. The people that are not in the know, are they?
Yeah, exactly.
So Dave Stalcott put up here a great scouting report today, Matt. It brought levity to my morning.
Yeah, you gotta read that thing. That's about the turd in the punch bowl thing, but that was fun. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Dave, great point. Anybody have any questions for Matt and I? Let's talk about a little bit. Greg and Matt and I talked a little bit yesterday how big separation between prompt wood right now or wood for 2 or 3 weeks out. Wood for 2 or 3 weeks out really isn't getting a lot of business. If you got prompt wood and you can get a truck on it the next day, you sent me over an email too the other day asking about the price of freight. And what we noticed in talking to Matt, freight is almost back. I think Greg said it's probably 20 to 30% above pre-COVID levels. So freight is kind of falling off the shelf, right?
Yeah, you said like 350 a mile because we were $5 and $6 a mile at COVID peak, and some people were paying $10 a mile for short haul stuff, and it was insane. But I was asking you for just to do the comparison for what it would cost to get from Mobile, Alabama, for example, or Montgomery, Alabama, to Atlanta, and it's about $50, which is still kind of pricey. But when you look at those cross market opportunities, the thing about in Southern Pine, I wanted to talk about that today because I don't know how many of the listeners are new to the Southern Pine market and have gotten kind of forced into it because of lack of other species. But Southern Pine is going all the way from the Gulf to the Great Lakes, and treaters that traditionally used spruce for their treated that just did inside spruce are switching over using Southern Yellow Pine, and it's going literally just from the whole eastern half of the United States, covering east of the Mississippi, north to south.
Matt, I mean, so we have buyers in Wisconsin, Minnesota buying pine now, and I think we said this on a show before, talking to a framer a guy named Chris who watches this show a lot. He had a great point a few months ago talking to him. I said, well, why is Southern Pine, why did it take forever to get accepted in Wisconsin? He goes, you know why? Because somebody's dad told him years ago they didn't like it.
Yeah, I'm not reading stuff's too hard. Do it the way Daddy did it.
Somebody at a lumber yard heard that, so they always tell their buyers that. But in fact, he goes, I grew up as a framer in the field, and the only thing I notice when it comes out, it may be a little bit heavier, and we throw it up. And so he goes, now that he runs a big framing company and buys lumber directly, and there's a big disparity between spruce and pine, guess what he buys? Pine.
Yeah, and it's not like you're carrying it around by the bundle either. You're carrying it around by the piece. I mean, it's just a little bit heavier, but it's not 5 times heavier, such as a guy that's, your 25-year-old framer that's got the limber back that I don't have can pick up a 2x412 and carry it 15 feet and nail it up. It's not that big a deal.
But it's no different than when I was a kid at a lumber yard, and I'm like, hey, Dad, why? He always said, hey, look, at the Chicago market, everybody used to love green Doug fir and Doug fir until spruce became really cheap in the 70s, and everybody went to that, and then they all wanted spruce. Then you try to ship them Doug fir, and they're like, well, we don't like this. Well,
if you think about how the stuff gets handled when it's on the job site, people set trusses with cranes. They don't pass them up, up ladders. So all you really do is standing there, placing it and putting your bracing in between it. And wall panels are just walked up by 3 or 4 people. And unless you're just in a stick framing market, that's it's not really applicable. The argument for it's too heavy to work with just doesn't hold.
Well, no, it doesn't. But listen, if you're a spruce trader and you're selling somebody and you're not making any money off of selling Southern Yellow Pine to your person in Wisconsin, you're not going to push it to them.
No.
If you get a 45% split off the gross profit on a truck and you're making $5,000 a truck and you get $100 for selling somebody's pine truck, you're not going to sell the pine truck.
Absolutely.
So this goes back to what Matt's talking about as buyers. you sometimes need to go outside of your current species expert and get another southern yellow pine expert or start learning about it. And like I said, Matt's guide, Layman's guide, Matt, you really specialize and have for years. And before southern pine was even sexy, you were putting the sexy into it.
Yeah, it was fun when nobody knew what to do with it.
Right. So Ken Diulio, is that right? Diuilo said if it was up to me, I'd be putting southern yellow pine from Omaha to Oregon.
Well, you know, it is an interesting thing about pine right now too, is that everybody's piling on it from a manufacturing perspective too, because it's the breadbasket for timber. But just think about when you start, you know, all these mills get cranky. We're making 2 billion more feet per year out of the South. Things are going to change. This isn't going to be a forever phenomenon either. We're going to start scraping up some of this timberland that there's plenty of and plenty of trees, and the whole dynamic's going to change in a decade from now. It's not going to look like it does now by any chance.
Yeah, and look at you get a stick of southern pine now. The way they dress it, dry it, bundle it, and ship it, it's a damn nice product.
It does look good. It's the only thing you got to be careful about is if you could get southern pine, if you get a mill that will wrap it, it'll make all the difference in the world. You can store it, but it's not good. Everybody knows you can't sit it on the back of it out in the yard in the rain and the sun through the summer, and it just doesn't. But they say it doesn't weather well, but actually no lumber weathers well when it's sitting outside in the elements. But you start comparing your unwrapped southern pine to your wrapped SPF, and you look at it 6 months down the road or 3 months down the road, you go, well, this pine's going crazy. Well, so unwrap your spruce. It's going to start turning black, so it's not going to be any better. But you got to treat it the same as you treat everything else.
Hey, look at when you're buying loads now for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. You definitely want to have it wrapped, put it underneath the shed, because as you see, Sean Higgins said, pine lumber yard's awful. You know,
sure it does. But so does everything else if you leave it out in the rain.
Yeah, I've had it in reloads before. We've piled it up, 10 years ago, had it sitting outside in 100-degree weather, and it's been raining on with no paper. You actually walk through and hear band snapping, right?
Yeah, it'll walk on you if you don't take care of it. You got to certainly think about your turns.
Right.
I've had a lot of people ask lately about the quantities of southern yellow pine on a truck, and I was thinking about one of my trading things I used to do is I used to always figure my tallies based on lineal footage and not board footage. And just like the total linear footage of the number of links bundles that you have should total about 160. And if you kind of think about a 40-foot flatbed that's got all 8-footers on it, it's got 5 rows of 8-footers that are in 4 stacks. So that's 20 bundles of 8-footers at times 8 foot is 160 lineal feet. So if you're ever trying to figure out what the pack sizes kind of vary a lot in the South, but if you want a quick way to figure out how much you can put on a truck, just add up the total lengths of all the bundles that you have to 160, and that'll give you your.
So Matt, real quick, what I wanted to go through with paper, still yard's awful. Well, Sean, you got to get a better yard to put it at then.
Sean's going to win that argument. There's nobody. Yeah. You can't do anything about the nature of the wood. He's
it
right.
Sounds like Sean's dug in deep on that argument. But one thing too is 4 inch and 6 inches a little bit longer. But when you get in the wides, I've kept wides on the ground for a long time, but I usually keep them inside, right?
Yeah, they tend to cup on you though. They get a little kind of U-shaped if you leave them alone too long.
Park a vehicle on top, right?
Yeah, or just nail it up. Do what you got it for. Wrap it in sheathing and put a door in front of it.
So, question for you, just real quick, with a lot of the change in the market over the last few weeks, we noticed one thing, that housing starts basically have kind of returned to the level of what we're able to build, right? And if you look at housing starts right now versus a few months ago, we're probably going to build less houses than we started out the year at.
Absolutely. We're not going to do 1.6 million.
We're not going to do 1.6 million. We're pulled back. So inventory is going up. Housing is slowing. There's some regional markets that are doing well, but for the most part, as I look at it today with the information I have, the housing market is slowing down. which in turn leads to the lumber market slowing down, right?
Yep.
Which isn't a bad thing. We have ability to catch our breath here after what we did, get some more resources to build some stuff. I think people are building less inventory. What are you seeing out there from your people as far as the multifamily, the retail level, when you have your events like you had the other day? It doesn't seem like there's any fear to build inventory, any fear of getting anything. When somebody's buying, they want to make sure they're going to see it in 2 or 3 days. Talking to a lot of sellers, there's some markets that are doing great, but it doesn't seem to be the volumes that we had before. What's your thought there?
Yeah, this time of year, everybody gets excited about the final big September surge because for the framing to get done before the weather turns bad. And I think people's expectation is that's going to happen to some degree, but it's certainly not going to happen like it did last year. We're not going to have the fourth quarter this year that we had last year. So I think what I heard from all of my conversations with my guys are saying, like, I need to buy some lumber, but I think the market's coming off in August. I'm planning to buy the third or fourth week of August. But nobody's planning to build inventories like spring inventories. They're just going to be filling in for whatever they think they need for September and October. And at this point, they don't really know what they need for September and October. And every time you turn on the TV, it looks like it's going to be less. So,
you and I talked about it too, about the trust facilities that had guarantee orders out to the end of the year that all of a sudden disappeared.
Yeah, and I heard from another guy that told me he was up in Michigan, the Michigan area, and his trust guys are booked out for like 6 weeks. And that doesn't mean that just because everybody's some places 1 week, some places 6 weeks. It's just in general, though, the whole tone is not. It's not a big lengthy order file. The order files are coming in, and you look at the mill offerings I watched some mill offerings that were from 2 weeks ago to last week. They went out from prompt to 2 weeks, and now they're back to 1 week. And it's I want to reemphasize to everyone that's when a mill says you got a shipment date, it's not an order file date. And when the day that West Fraser said that they had a good afternoon and the order file moved out 2 weeks ago, well, think about that logistically. Could you even write up 2 weeks worth of wood in orders in an afternoon? It just simply couldn't. It didn't happen. And if you're a sales manager, you're sitting there, you sleep with the switch, and all of a sudden you go from prompt wood or 1 week wood to a 2 week order file, and you raise your price $10. You're not really paying attention. So when I hear those kind of things, I got to look. It just logistically and strategically doesn't make sense that it would have happened. So once again, it's position talking.
James Bolt was saying Southeast Framer typically have only option of Southern Yellow Pine per plan. We don't see SPF much per plan on spec as an option. And that's the flip side of this. There's times when pine, it has been a reason to go a big premium to spruce. So it's good to have options if you can use James, in my opinion, you got to check all your specs on it. If you can use, you're in the South, you're surrounded by Euro pounding the docks all day long down there, right? And you're surrounded by, that's the final point in the Southeast where the cars end up for Southern pine or for spruce out of the Great Lakes region, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and also out of the Western BC mills. So it's good to have optionality on all that so you can compare prices, especially long-term. Because when something is overvalued, like spruce at times, and futures goes a discount, you can sometimes get people to forward price you on your big jobs at a discount to the price for different species. And it's just good to have that optionality.
Yeah, and one of the biggest lessons that I learned over COVID is we watched lumber prices rise and fall about $50, $100, and $200, but most builders, if you're a production builder, they were factoring in a price of about $1,000 for lumber anyway. So just because the price went up, they didn't really get hurt. It just didn't make as much money. But that's why nobody really squealed about the price of lumber till we got to over $1,000. But for James, one of the things that's the biggest impact on having to use Southern pine is just the availability of it. Your lumber dealer can buy a truckload for a 3 days delivery versus a carload for 3 weeks shipment and 3 weeks delivery. Spruce, it's just just logistically, it makes more sense for guys to use Southern Pine if they can make it work.
Yeah, he just sent back true. If we can get approval of substitution request, we opt for cheaper products. No doubt. Look, as with anything in life, the more optionality you have, the more negotiating power you have, right?
Yeah, and you got to be careful. Like, for example, like 2 weeks ago when the board was down at 480, and you go, well, that's cheap. I'd love to have some of that. Well, that's good, but that's going to be late November shipment, mid-November by the time you get it. That's not something you can take to the job site next week. It's going to be 2 months before you can get it. But
one thing I haven't kept a good track of, Matt, is panels. Tell me what's going on in OSB and plywood.
Well, plywood's been kind of holding its own here lately for some reason, but I'm not really understanding why that is, unless it's just lack of production. But OSB's finally caught up, and it's getting a little sloppy. I think OSB is going to probably follow Southern Pine off in some chunks. But this is the time of year when OSB typically goes basically just kind of flat line. It's not as volatile. It should be reasonably priced where it is, maybe a little bit cheaper between now and October, and then start looking for. That's what the contracts start to get negotiated at the end of the year, and then everybody gets all excited about not being able to have it again. But I think for right now, you should look for panels and OSB to be relatively flat to the softer side for the next couple of months.
If you're a buyer of OSB out there, are you bidding big discounts to today's price, or what would you recommend to your people?
I wouldn't, because it's just starting to weaken.
I got you. Okay. Well, cool, Matt. So look at, hey, I want to ask you too. How did your call go the other day with your folks that you had on?
It was awesome. It's ironic that there was about 20 people on that first call. The second call, about 10 on the first call, and they all said identically the same thing. It was truss manufacturers, wood preservers, small builders, production builders, component manufacturers. There were ironically no mills in the calls, but everybody said the same thing. Everybody was positioned the same way. Inventories were lean. They expected August to be softer in price. They were going to buy later in the month, and I think a lot of them did not jump in last week when they thought they were going to have to, because they didn't. I mean, just when the market got kind of busy, because they really didn't need to. I mean, the plan was they said, well, let's look around, and a lot of them were Southern Pine users, and they said, well, spruce is taking a little pop, and green fir, Doug fir had a little pop. Eastern spruce got some pop, but Southern Pine got nothing. It was they just watched the mill list grow longer and longer, and then over the last week to 10 days, they've watched the mill list get bigger everywhere else, in addition to the South. So I still think we got another couple of weeks of overall weakness. I think the market's going to soften, and we'll probably come into September at a better place to buy 2 weeks than we are today.
Where do you think 4-inch, or where do you think Southern Pine could fall to? Because some of these numbers are already pretty low from what it looks like to me, right? I mean, it's
kind of like that interest rate idea. See, 6% didn't look good from 2, looked great from 12.
Yeah, I'm never surprised when I see how massive moves can be sometimes. But when I'm looking at 4-inch at 580 to 650, I mean, what do you think it ultimately could go down to find a big trading range and move volume off?
400.
Okay, fair enough.
I think 400 can be a money maker for mills. It's not a big money maker. But the Canadian mills are going to have a decrease in their log costs coming up in the fourth quarter. I think 400 is a money maker for Southern Pine mills, but the timber's gone up a little bit, but not enough to be have a chokehold. But the low grades also, which is a big part of everything, is closed this gap to number 2. So there's not. I mean, it's almost the same price. So even your lower grades are helping price, and sawdust and chips and all that kind of stuff. Prices are up on those. So overall, I think we can see $400, and I'm not sure if we get to $400. It's kind of like everybody says, like, what price would you buy lumber at today? $400. Okay. So if you look around and everybody's got the price of the lumber is $400 everywhere, then it's no big deal anymore because everybody's got it. The only reason it's attractive is because nobody's there. But once it gets there, there's a reason for it, and you don't want it as much anymore.
Well, yeah, big, and also a big difference between whether you're speculating on it or you got it sold at 800 on a project that you sold 2 or 3 months ago, right?
Yeah, and I don't think there's as much short unbought projects out there, and for especially for multifamily, as one might think there is. That I think that because the market's been soft, there's a lot of conversation about multifamily suppliers have orders that they're sitting on and haven't bought yet, but they just came off a year of chasing the market and having to get orders canceled on them, and they've got money in these things. When the market's falling like it has been from a May bid down to August, there's no reason to be sitting on it. They just, I think those things are covered, and there's not a big pile of pent up demand. The only things getting pent up demand are houses that are getting canceled or delayed or canceled, contracts getting canceled, and that's going to increase inventory for a little bit for home builders. But those people still that were wanting to buy are still going to want to buy.
Yeah, I think the home builders and multifamily are doing whatever they can to keep this market, and I think there's still an underlying demand out there. Again, when there's so many movements going on in our rates, and that's a guess all the time. I noticed one thing: some of these home builders are buying points down for people to get them into a house. They're figuring out ways to move stuff. So
yeah.
Maybe this is a good reset for things, just to get we get to a level where we actually can build at, and we start building up from there, right?
Yeah, one of the things that I also just heard about recently and never thought about was, the same way we do in the lumber business. When lumber gets tight and you can't get it, you end up double buying and triple buying, and you get caught at the top of the market with too much wood, and all of a sudden your 6-week inventory turns into 3 months of inventory. I think I'm hearing more and more cases of people that had multiple offers on homes, that when they, in one subdivision where you had 4 or 5 different production builders in the same subdivision, they would make multiple offers on the same homes, say, okay, whichever one gets done first is the one that I'm going to take, and they cancel the others. That could be a pretty big deal, and that there's no way to know that until you start to see it happen. But I think that could be a wild card for the housing market. That could be pretty negative, is seeing that people were double bought and triple bought on homes that they had no intention of taking all 3 of them.
Yeah, no. So look, if you want to sign up for Matt, I'll throw up Matt's email here for you, so you can go and sign up for Matt's for Layman's Lumber Guide, and to get the scouting report, it's matt@laymansguide.com. I think it's a critical report to have for everybody to look at. Once you get in with Matt, like I said, he's got all types of programs he runs for his group of partners that he does things with. And yeah, Matt, I mean, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I would suggest, and I want before anybody makes a commitment to buying my products, I really want them to be familiar with it and make sure that they understand what it's all about. And I mean, my specialty is timing. It's not price. It's when the market's going to rise and fall. And I would encourage everybody. The scouting report's free, and we're actually going to be expanding our pricing on that in the coming week. And there's no commitment at all. You just sign up, just that address that's there, and you get the scouting report. It'll come to you on Thursday mornings. It's kind of a market update and a price update of just what's currently going on. And this information is coming from you guys. It's information from the field that's coming back to me, and it's not like we're copying somebody's paper. It's just all coming back from. And a good example of that is yesterday. I was getting ready to put the scouting report out yesterday, and I had Southern Yellow Passes down by about $20. And then one of the scouts came in and said, just got a note from a mill that said they were selling it at random less 95. And that's pretty pertinent. I mean, my numbers went all of a sudden were from down 20 to down 70. And I would have missed that if it hadn't come from somebody in the field that was looking.
Matt, you're going to make somebody mad. You're supposed to keep that a secret, because that's how they clip that $90 coupon off people.
Sorry, buddy. Just don't buy any. If you guys are thinking about just buying Southern Pine, don't do it yet.
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize when they look at a number on a publication that there are groups out there that have the financial wherewithal and the horsepower and the orders where they bid $200 under those prices sometimes.
Yep. And they'll get them.
Yeah.
Yep. John Mark says that their business in Montreal is down 20%, 26%, and that was Montreal was you had to almost pay to come into the city there for a while, did you, just to be able to ride through?
Montreal was the Austin and Dallas of Canada as far as building. Montreal and Toronto.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, John Mark. That's great information. Well, look at Matt. Great to have you. We'll do this again next week. Again, this is lunch with Lumbermen with Matt Layman and Ashley Boeckholt. Well, thanks for the input. And Sean, I was just giving you a hard time. I got dinner next time. So
good. He's paid. You can pay my share of the dinner too. Thanks.
Yeah, Sean took me out, my wife and I, with his wife and him a couple months back. It was awesome. He didn't need to do that, and he picked up. We had a great time. It's good.
What a guy.
Not only that, it's just fun telling lumber stories. It's amazing how much everybody knows the people in the industry that everybody else knows, right?
Yeah. And your wives love it too, don't they?
My wife's like, you got always talk about lumber all the time.
Anything else?
It's awesome. His wife's great. We had a great time. All right, Matt, thank you very much.
Cool. See you guys. Have a great week.